Hey everybody, how you doing? We've talked a lot about the Athletics after the Nevada legislature approved a deal for $380 million in a combination of a bond issue and tax credits to assist with funding the construction of the $1.5 billion anticipated Oakland Athletics
We all have different
Las Vegas
paths,
ballpark. And yes, we
different
do.
callings, different challenges.
We do all have.
We are each on a journey to find out who we are.
And that's exactly what the Oakland Athletics were trying to do: find out who they were. And arguably still trying to do that because Las Vegas posits a different path. But back then, the A's were really at a point where they were headed on three paths. And this is 4 years ago, because a lot of people think, well, okay, the deal this day is done. And then even I put out that, well, it took Las Vegas 2 years to get this done in earnest. But really, the effort to bring the A's to from Oakland to Las Vegas, started, it started 4 years ago. Okay. And you would say, well, why do I assert that, Zenny? And it has to do with in August 17th, 2019 vlog that I put out about the Portland city and a private organization, private effort that was led by then Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson. Now he's with the Broncos. Remember he and his wife, Sierra, to build a ballpark in Portland. And the minders there set their sights on the Oakland Athletics, thinking that they were vulnerable to a move, and had at least a couple of meetings in person with Dave Kaval, the president of the Athletics. And that was August of 2019. And so the thought was, well, gee, are we really going to have a shot? Now, let me put 2019 in its proper focus, okay? Early on in 2019, the whole thing was just getting started. Dave Kaval was crafting what would later be legislation for tax increment financing for Howard Terminal based on an idea that I'd given him in 2017. And he worked with Nancy Skinner and Rob Bonta and Oakland Mayor Libby Schaff and related staff members, and worked on the language for that and consultants. And through 2018, and then we go into 2019, the monies for it had just been paid, at least the first run of it, talking about staff monies, by the Athletics to the city of Oakland in February 26th of 2019. The A's had put in almost $300,000, and they were supposed to wire $117,000 more. And how I know this is I have an email from then assistant city administrator Betsy Lake back to Dave Kaval saying, hey, we need the rest of it, the money, which is total, I think, about $117,000. It was a very unprofessional way of going after the money. That's another story right now, but that's how they were handling things, as opposed to, you say, okay, was any real quick, how should it have been done? Well, you have everything by invoice done by your revenue officer versus the A's revenue officer, and it refers to a particular fund balance and a date and everything. It's not this email that says, hey, pay me now, right? I've talked about that before. It's a bad look. It could point to extreme levels of corruption, or at least the possibility that that's the case, which is against California law. But I digress. So anyway, point is, they were getting underway. They didn't have a project manager. They brought Molly Mabern on as the project manager, who presented herself on her LinkedIn at the time. She's changed it since as being able to work again with her old friend Betsy Lake. And I thought, oh, hey, Everyone complains about Libby or about me asking Libby to run Howard Terminal because we're friends. We're not really related, right? But then Betsy Lake goes and brings in her old friend. Okay. Just think about that for a second, but that's not what this is about. Okay. Anyway, point is that was just getting going. And so we get to August and the Portland issue. And so I don't have evidence yet who approached whom first, but I believe Portland approached the A's first, knowing that the A's were about the task of building a new ballpark, but hadn't really gotten up to speed. We're just getting up to speed with Howard Terminal in Oakland. And so Portland, aggressive as was their wont, pounced. And so, but they weren't the only ones to do that. Because while that was going on, there was something else going on, which means that even though Portland was aggressive, Las Vegas was also aggressive. But I believe that in this instance, Dave Kaval was sent to contact Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman, all right, because she put out this tweet, all right, and here is the tweet that she put out. There it is. It's May 12th, 2021, all right. She put out the tweet. But read this. It reads, Las Vegas has always been open to conversations with major league sports franchises seeking new locations. And then it continues. For 20 years, these talks have included dialogue with league commissioners and for the Athletics. And she specifically mentioned the Oakland A's, even tagged the A's Twitter account. These have been occurring since 2019. Look at me, okay? 2019, all right? 2019. She's had these conversations since 2019, she writes. All right? Hashtag, or rather, no hashtag, but City of Las Vegas, at City of Las Vegas is excited. All right? So the groundwork for what we have witnessed of late was really late in 2019. And then later, Dave Kaval intimated that in a statement, almost a throwaway line, that it's not even worth digging up right now because it's more effort to dig it up than to play it. But Kaval said that he was really the emissary, and he was sort of the report back person on behalf of Major League Baseball. So in total, what was going on here was this. The real overarching thing that was going on was that in 2018, the Supreme Court said, hey, sports gambling is legal, okay? And overturned the law that prohibited gambling and returned to the states the decision whether or not they want to have sports gambling. And so that left it so that the advantage in that area that was held by 5 states, most notably Nevada, was very quickly about to be whittled away. And this was a great thing for the sports organizations. So a number of people realized, hey, where am I going to turn to get expertise? Who am I going to call on? And the answer is you don't call on Ghostbusters, you call on MGM, Las Vegas Center. You call on the people who have the expertise to make equipment, to handle, well, betting in sports. And on top of that, a UNLV professor in 2014 wrote a paper, 114 page paper I still have, that showed how professional sports could do sports betting in a way that all but guaranteed no improprieties or wrongdoing, unlike efforts of the past. Okay. That was a big reason why Mark Davis took a different look at Las Vegas and thought, you know what? We need to be here. We need to set the tone for it. So Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, was really ahead of the curve here. And that's got to be noted. But all that impacted the Athletics and Major League Baseball, because Major League Baseball had vocally, publicly said that it was going to go into sports gambling in a big way. My words, not theirs, but that was the case. And so the talk or sending Dave Kaval, which I believe is what happened, I haven't confirmed this, but sending Dave Kaval to talk to Carolyn Goodman was the first effort to do a sort of fact-finding effort on behalf of both the A's and Major League Baseball. At about that time, also, the commissioner had said, hey, look, we're in a situation where we've got to find how we approach that, the commissioner said, in terms of gambling, was also contingent upon stadiums and how stadiums would be refurbished. But he felt first they had to resolve the matter of stadiums in both Oakland and Tampa. And the Oakland situation seemed more dire than the Tampa one in the eyes of Major League Baseball. So you put all that together, and it spells Dave Kaval making that trip to Las Vegas to talk to Carolyn Goodman about, the possibility of baseball being in Las Vegas to begin with. And as that was occurring, we go into later in the year, on October 11th of 2019. That's when California Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law SB 293 Skinner. Okay, that paved the way for Howard Terminal. And in an interview that we conducted with Dave Kaval the next year, me being myself and Zenny 62 Media blogger Richard Hake, Dave really succinctly and clearly laid out what the Athletics' objectives were at Howard Terminal from a revenue perspective right here. And I'll play it for you right here, what he said to us in this video that should be watched over and over again by anybody who really wants the key to what happened that eventually led, or keys to what happened and eventually led the A's to wind up in Las Vegas. Here's what Dave Kaval said. Remember, this is August 18th, 2020 to us, okay? Here. That part of the pieces are complete. And I know, of course, there's sponsorship, but give us a picture of that because it's seldom talked about.
Well, I think it's important to understand that the ballpark is completely privately financed. So the A's are going to come up with the hundreds of millions of dollars necessary for that. And that's never been done in Oakland on any facility. That is a huge part of this. I know we talk about it all the time, but I think it is something that's really important for folks to understand. The exciting part is that the project, the ballpark, the associated commercial development, retail, the areas for small business, the housing, all of that generates tax revenue for the city and the county and the state. And those tax revenues, it's called but-for tax revenue. It's tax revenue that would exist only if there was this project built. That money can be channeled back to pay for things in Oakland. And that can be really beneficial. That can obviously help with things like sea level rise. It can help with railroad safety in and around Jack London Square. It can help with transportation improvements. And it can help with air quality. So these are the types of things that can come with a project like this. The community benefits on top of the fact that we're building this incredibly, iconic privately financed stadium that I think people hopefully will learn more about through this process and be able to say, hey, that's something we want to get behind. Like, this is an opportunity that only rarely comes about. You need a mega project like this to generate those tax dollars that the city can use as it sees fits. And if it doesn't have that, the city's going to be at a shortage. And you're going to have the budget deficits that you see right now, and the city cutting back on social services and things like that. And no one wants that. That's in no one's interest. That doesn't help Oakland or anything like that. So I think you bring up a great point. We got state legislation. Nancy Skinner sponsored a bill, SB 293, to have a specific infrastructure financing district for either Howard Terminal or anywhere else in Oakland.
Listen to this, folks.
This is a vehicle that could be used on other projects. We led the effort on that bill. It passed last year, mostly unanimous votes everywhere. It's a big winner for Oakland, and it'll be a key centerpiece to making this project not just a win for the A's, but a win for the entire community.
And I'm glad you said that, because in what I was trying to explain to people, Dave, is that if this project is valued at $2 billion, that becomes the base year assessed value. If you find an additional $500 million in property around it for the base year, and it accelerates, and we get back to the rate of growth. The rate of growth in assessed value in Jack London Square has been 7%
Right.
For a few years, which is, if you just do a calculation at 4%, wow. I mean, the returns are incredible. But the law, if you actually read it in detail, and I find a lot of people don't, it allows it for to be used for military bases, for other areas throughout this Oakland. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is a but why doesn't the city do more education about this? Because I tried to explain it, just to try to show you what I was after. I tried to explain it, or I asked Oakland Councilmember Nikki Bass if I could explain it to her group, because no one else wanted to talk about it or knew about it. And they said no. And Carl Chan just don't say anything. And I said, why? This is a good thing for the public. What's going on?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I think, for some people, they might just not fully understand it. It can be a little complicated, but I think it's a great vehicle for Oakland, for our community. Remember, there was redevelopment, and that wasn't a perfect thing, but it funded things like affordable housing, which obviously has been in a huge shortage since that went away. And so I think there are ways to use this legislation that really came completely out of our ballpark effort to help Oakland, not only for our project, but to usher in many other positive projects that will all come with community benefits, that will all create revenue streams that can support local nonprofits, help with air quality, help with public health, all the things that the city needs. Because the city of Oakland has a real challenge. It doesn't have enough revenue to support the city and social services that are required of the community. And that gap needs to be filled. And the only way that can be filled is with economic development. And one of the centerpiece projects is our ballpark at the waterfront with the associated development around it. It can be done in a way that ensures that the people who are living there now can have a real stake, an equity stake in the future, can be part of it. That's why we have this groundbreaking community benefits process that we're going through. So I think, we're doing a lot of things right. We're listening. We're ensuring that, people feel like they have a real seat at the table. But these things take time, and that's why we're working through the process. We've had COVID. But to actually be on track for next year of final approval, we actually feel pretty good about that. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been in our way or twists and turns along the way, but we feel confident that we can get to that next year and get this project going and get a shovel in the ground, get those people out there, almost 3,000 construction jobs, 6,000 permanent jobs, $7 billion in economic impact. This is a project, this is one of the biggest projects in the history of the Bay Area. So we're excited about where we are today.
Hey, before I go too far, and I want to stop it right there, because as you can tell by what Dave said, this was a big deal. The work that they did to get tax increment financing going, at least in terms of legislation, said that, hey, look, this is where Oakland is like Las Vegas. They worked to get the legislation passed at the legislature, California legislature. Gavin signs it in law October 19th, 2019. And then what happens is that you've got, if you think about it, the city did absolutely nothing. What the city should have done was right then and there, 2019, and I remember seeing a resolution, I thought they were doing this, but they didn't do it, was establish the public financing authority immediately, establish the tax increment financing zones immediately. Instead, because they hired consultants that looked at the shape of the map and didn't understand how to target assessed value, let alone consider that, hey, you know what, the A's are the private organization. And I have to say that this is where the A's made a giant mistake, saying they don't want to pay property taxes. And if you say you don't want to pay property taxes and yet you want to use tax increment financing, guess what? You've wrecked the engine for tax increment financing. And yet that's what Dave was doing, but the city let him do it. The city didn't come out with, as if I were the project manager, I would have gotten together with the mayor and the council, and I would have had a press conference that said, hey, we're just saying to the A's, if you need tax increment financing to work, and we do, we need you to at least agree to pay property tax. But as opposed to saying no, because it makes it almost impossible for tax increment financing to work. Because if you want us to then use Melrose financing, which is the other thing they were doing. They had the city quite literally was turning over cartwheels and backflips to try to figure out how to deal with this. And I kept thinking, why are they doing this? And then I would ask Dave, I would say, Dave, you plan to pay a property tax, right? And then there was silence. And finally one day he said, yeah. I said, yeah, you gotta pay a property tax in order to make tax increment financing work. That's just the way the formula is. And it's a beautiful doubling formula, but you got to make it work for you. Okay. And keep that in mind because they made the same noise about not wanting to pay property tax in Las Vegas parlance. All right. And now you would say, what's the thinking of Dave Kaval, primarily less John Fisher, but Dave Kaval. And the thinking, purely is this. The thinking is, you know what? We want the funds that operate the business of the athletics to be generated purely by the stadium itself, but not get to a point where we're at a negative operating income and we still have to dig into our reserves to pay the property tax. Now, that is the worst case scenario, but that's how they think. And if you have, unless you have some doubts about that, let's hear what Dave Kaval said in response to a question by Richard Hake on that same August 2020 interview. Here, take a look. Richard, do you have a question for Dave?
You're kind of hitting a lot of the points that I was looking at. I think at the bigger, I know payroll issues are not your thing. You don't deal with player acquisition and such. But how does that help move this forward as far as getting fans involved, getting that money, whether it's ticket sales or better TV deals and that stuff. How does that come into play?
Well, that's really one of the key reasons we're building the new ballpark. The new ballpark brings a better fan experience, so it drives higher attendance. Two, it allows us to greatly enhance our revenue base as a organization, and it allows us to have all these other economic benefits for the community because you're going to bring 2.5 million people to the waterfront in Oakland, creating all this economic activity. But for the baseball team, it means we can have a much higher payroll. In order to compete in a 2-team market with the Giants, who also have a waterfront stadium, we need to be able to have higher payrolls. Right now we've really been handcuffed because of the Coliseum. We don't control all the revenue streams. We don't draw the number of fans that the Giants draw at the waterfront, and we need a more competitive product. And we've actually had very good products on the field, if you guys know that, and we've still struggled to draw. That goes all the way back to the 70s. If you look at Charlie Finley and things like that. So in the modern era where entertainment is, where people are looking to invest their dollars, we need a new stadium. We need a fan experience that's more conducive to that. And that's why we're doing it. So hopefully, when we get the new stadium, we can have the higher payrolls. We can keep our talent much longer. We can compete for more World Series. We've never had a problem developing young talent. Look at the team now. Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Sean Manaea, Ramon Laureano. We're exceptional at that. Billy Beane, David Forrest, they're the best in the business, in the whole industry. It's just about having the resources to retain that for the long haul. And that's what this stadium is all about. And I think long-term, it's going to be well worth it to achieve that.
Speaking of the Coliseum, what is the plan for the Coliseum? And I want to throw in a slider. Is it possible at all? This is just a beg to put the stadium on the National Register of Historic. I'm going to leave that one alone and not come back to that one. There's another point I was going to make, but I'll slide over to that here. But I want to get to this just for the purpose of time and efficiency. You heard Dave and how they think about what they need from the stadium. They weren't getting it from the Coliseum. They needed a new stadium to have that, okay? And so, and paying for talent is a big issue. You can't do that at the Coliseum with getting revenues just from your game days and just from your ticket sales and just from your luxury boxes when luxury boxes are not desired and really not in good shape, enough to really command a high price at all, let alone a medium price, and arguably barely a low price. Okay, uh, and that's the state of the Coliseum. Also, a lot of people don't realize the Athletics do not own the Coliseum. They don't. The JPA does. Someone was saying, well, hey, John Fisher can come in and make all these changes or anything. John, first of all, is not authorized to do that. The JPA makes the changes. It's written in the lease. That's the JPA's responsibility. A lot of athletics fans are letting the Oakland government and the JPA get away with murder just by putting everything on John Fisher solely because he's a billionaire, thinking that because he's a billionaire, he's supposed to spend his own money. But I don't care if you're a millionaire or a billionaire. Nobody worth their salt designs a business so that it's a money pit for them, but under the idea that somebody has that doesn't have their money, that they're supposed to lose their money. All right. And yet that's what fans essentially do. And they do it consistently with comment, without thought, and they expect someone to follow an edict that they themselves wouldn't follow if they were in the position of the baseball owners themselves as an owner. So they wouldn't do that. No one does that. And so the question then is, how do you design the edifice? Okay. How do you design an edifice that makes enough money to pay for, not just for itself, but pay for the operation of a top flight major league organization, in this case, the Oakland Athletics? And look, the Coliseum wasn't doing it. And that's why when the team would perform badly, people weren't coming. That hurt them even more. And so finally, I just said, blanket, we're just going to dump players because nobody's coming. The pandemic really hurt them a great deal, hurt everybody. It's still hurting people. And the hope was that the city of Oakland could really get off the schneid and get this done. I say get off the schneid because by 2020, when he and I were talking, nothing had been going on with respect to a tax increment financing district. This was August 2020. It was signed into law. If you go just 3 months up, a year before that, nothing happened. There was no establishment. It was still talking about what the map should look like, and because of assessed value, as opposed to saying we will start with the ballpark at you heard me say $2 billion, okay, and in assessed value. All right, let me get to some of your questions here. For those of you who can't see it, I'll post these. All right, it says the A's recent problem is to keep the talent even for the short haul. Hopers then says how to become a millionaire in Oakland, start off as a billionaire. Hopa says you don't have the fan base given the needed political base to put enough pressure on Oakland city government to get a deal done. And I disagree with that. The A's fan base isn't engaged enough or inclined enough politically to want to go down to City Hall symbolically and do a protest or anything. And it's not that they can't, because they can do it. I mean, look at how the A's fans amassed for the reverse boycott, right? They could have done the same thing with City Hall. They could have went to any City Hall meeting and on Zoom. As it was, they did crush Zoom whenever the matter of the Athletics came up of late at City Council, all right? But in terms of, in person, no, that never happened. So, at all. So, I mean, I disagree. For some particular reason, A's fans are afraid of Oakland government. And why is the biggest question I have. Then Vlad the Impaler, says, why didn't the A's shoot for a simple proposal at Howard Terminal instead of the huge, costly proposal that included the stadium plus housing and so on? Well, I think the problem here is that you're looking at it as all one shebang. And you're not looking at it as it should be looked at, which is in phases, okay? So let me put it this way. If someone gives you 55 acres of prime real estate on the shores of Oakland, in the middle, really smack in the middle of the Bay Area, which is the tech capital of the world, which means that it has highest housing costs in the world among those, is expensive to live in. You're not going to just say, well, gee, that's great. I'll just like use maybe part of it. You're going to figure out a way to use the whole doggone thing. And that's what that was about. It wasn't about the Fishers thinking we're going to spend money to build buildings on the parcels that were laid out. No, the idea was that, and Dave said this to me in a later interview after the August 21 that I referred to, said that they actually needed help finding developer in Oakland. And that told me that the A's were doing everything that they could on their part to make this happen. But they also had Major League Baseball saying, well, you know what, gambling's not in California. If we don't get what we want in California, we have these legislations going through, which didn't work out, right? Let's take a look, keep an eye on Las Vegas in case we don't get what we need. We're not going where we need to go in a timely fashion. So they were working, that's why I said they're working at parallel paths, really, for 4 years, primarily because of the existence of gambling in Nevada and not in California. If gambling were in California, I think the Athletics would have been even more inclined to stay and work things out. But the bottom line is gambling wasn't there. The politics to get it done, not so much the politics, but the government bureaucracy to get it done wasn't there. And on top of that, the A's, which don't like paying a property tax, were on the hook paying staff time. And I believe I was told by one source they were paying for Steve Kawa's time. Who's Steve Kawa? He was the negotiator that was called in to broker a deal between the Athletics and the city of Oakland. And look, I'm acquainted with Steve. I haven't talked to Steve in a long, long time, but I've never thought of Steve as a person who understood sports. Or the business of sports. So why they brought him in is a mind boggler to me. But Steve's a smart guy, and I'm sure he could handle that aspect of the situation. My point was that they didn't need that, and yet they brought him in. And the question is, okay, why are you having the A's pay for yet another example of the city of Oakland wasting time? Okay, wasting time. And when does the wasting time stop? And what was the wasting time about? It was about the reverse of what you heard Dave Kaval talk about when he expressed why SB 293 Skinner was so important. And that, look, by the time Libby's time sunset as mayor and Shang, even before the election, the city was so not into doing tax increment financing, even though they talk like they were. I even had Libby talking to me saying, we're going to use a limited obligation bond, and this kind of bond is going to work so it doesn't fall back on the general fund and all that. And what I was trying to explain to Libby is you start your public financing authority, and then you transfer your bonding power to that authority, and then you arrange it by lease so that the authority winds up owning the project if the bonds default. But the problem with Libby is that Libby's, she was born on third base with this project and thought that she knew it all and didn't. And so every time I was talking with her, and you could see this on the videos, it was more a challenge to her to keep up with me rather than understand how to do the project better. And it was a bad look. It was bad the way Libby handled it on behalf of the city of Oakland as mayor. And it's her charter-born job to do economic development. That's in the law. You're supposed to improve the city's economy. And it was shameful for her to hire people who didn't have the right skills, hire them to make kind of an image on, well, I want to prove that I can do it with all this kind of person or that kind of person, as opposed to knowing friends like myself who've done this. We're not really brothers and sisters, so there's no nepotism, but she has had a lot of smart friends that she could have formed a kitchen cabinet in, just dropped her ego, opened her ears, and put us all to work. But she didn't do that, okay? Didn't do that at all. And cost the city dearly in a number of ways. And so what happened with how she handled this with respect to the Athletics, and what caused the Athletics to eventually say, "Hey, we're not going to do this," is instead of having a public financing authority to implement and draw up the lines for a tax increment financing zone like that, to start collecting the revenue like that, they argued over different maps. There was one, and they were all confused. You could tell. I kept saying to them, I said, "You don't argue about the map. It's the assessed value target. That makes it easier." And so you had these reporters who thought they knew stuff that they never handled before, and then they call themselves journalists, which is another story I don't want to touch right now. They're chiming in and saying, "Well, the map has to be this and all this," like they're experts. And I said, "No, it isn't. It doesn't." I said, "It's the assessed value. You're targeting assessed value to get to a particular level of tax increment financing revenue over a 45-year period, given an assumed rate of growth of the assessed value. 4% per year was, given the fact that it was actually more like 7%, modest. All right. Nothing. Okay. And yet you're looking at billions of dollars of returns from this. All right. But to show you how screwed up the whole thing was, Dave was saying, "Oh, we're going to build 12 billion there," which gets to your thing, because you're thinking, well, the A's kept saying 12 billion as if it's going to be one, and was really a schedule over 7 years. All right, 8 years. Okay, it was really that. But what I told Dave when he first announced the 12 billion in 2021, I said, "Look, if you're going to do that, you got to then tell what the tax increment financing revenue throw-off is going to be. And if you assume 4% for 12 billion, that's $9.7 billion in total tax increment financing revenue you'll have available. Cut that in half, and there's your bond issue that you can start building. You can start designing. Okay, that's how you do it. But what happens? You're dealing with people who didn't know how to do this, and they were getting scared of the numbers. And you've got new council members coming in. You have people like Lauren Taylor who'd never done this before, who were trusting consultants that didn't know what they were doing, and yet there was no project manager. The project manager, Molly Mayburn, you could tell this was her first game at bat, and yet it was so bad in terms of they're not giving her the proper exposure because she didn't really comfortably know, all right, that Betsy Lake would sign off on the documents as the assistant city administrator. Molly's supposed to be the project manager. So who's getting paid project manager money? Is Betsy taking part of that? That's supposed to go to Molly? What's going on? All right. And if so, is that a violation of California Government Code Section 290, which is 1090, which is conflict of interest? Okay. This is what happens when you don't have structure. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's what happens when you don't have structure. Okay. And they didn't. They didn't have there's stadium authorities and public financing authorities for this all over the country. In cities where you wouldn't even expect to see it, like Coachella Valley. Okay. And yet Oakland couldn't even establish a simple public financing authority. I mean, this is ridiculous. All right. So that I want to make clear that that's the Impala. That is the real way you should think about this. It wasn't simpler. It was simply that the A's decided that we don't have the partners and we don't have the land. In Vegas, they had prime land. So you take what's given to you. That's prime, huge land in the middle of one of the most sought after areas in the world. In the world. I repeat, in the world, okay? So to turn down Tropicana is foolish. Period, end of story. And I don't care what anyone says. A mega resort is not going to bring you more in terms of the overall economic throw-off and visibility that Major League Baseball does. Why? One word: television. Because that mega resort is not going to bring the constant eyeballs from television or internet mentions or mentions when you watch it that Las Vegas will get, just like it's getting from the Golden Knights will put it at number one during the Stanley Cup Finals in terms of internet search, right? Intensity according to Google, all right? That's not going to happen with a resort that just sits there. So someone who says, well, you can put anything there and it'll make as much money, you don't know what you're talking about when you say that, okay? A lot of people in the Nevada legislature made that crack, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I mean, do you know what time of the day it is? I mean, do you know what year and century this is? This is the internet age, okay? Television matters more now than it has ever before, even if it's changing in format. But I digress. All right, let me get back to your points. Here it says if A's had a 162 record versus a 62-100 record, then you have people will show up, otherwise they won't. And something else I want to do before I get too far into addressing your great questions here, I want to share with you something that I wrote regarding, and this has to do with the very day right here that this was November 25th, 2021. And it was Oakland A's ballpark, Las Vegas Festival Grounds, to be future home of the Oakland Athletics. This is when I finally called it. And I will read to you what it reads because it explains why I finally called it. Note, this is just over a year after Richard and I interviewed Dave Kaval. So to get this far, like this is one of 20 sites that the A's were considering, means that what happened was that once the letter was sent from Major League Baseball Commissioner Bob Manfred to Libby Schaaf saying, hey, look, we're not going to get this done in 2027. We're going to have to look at Las Vegas as an alternative. That was March 27th of 2021. Okay. They went to work on building off the relationships they had already established back in 2019. So that's what I'm saying. This wasn't a 2-year job. This was a 4-year job. But they were just sitting there. It was like, quite literally landmines sitting there, not seen by the city of Oakland, but just waiting for Oakland to slow down and not do it. And the minute that happened, the landmine of activity in Las Vegas, they all went off. This is what happened. And it started when the A's didn't get, and I really believe this rankled Dave Kaval, when they didn't get SB 293 Skinner done. I mean, when they got it done, but the city of Oakland didn't start using it and getting it passed. And so it means the A's weren't going to get their money to fund infrastructure, to do community benefits, to pay for that, to pay for off-site infrastructure. Okay, hear me. Pay for, and they say this, pay for off-site infrastructure. That was supposed to come out of the tax increment. All right. Instead, they were continuing to argue about it and keep arguing about it and keep arguing about it. All right. And the city was supposed to resolve that with TIF and didn't. And they turned around, and here the latest is Shang right out of the box of getting elected, saying she's going to force the whole thing on the A's. And so Dave and them were going, oh, you got to be kidding me here. All right. Because that's not what was supposed to happen. Tax increment financing was supposed to be used, and yet the city didn't use it. They went as far, and it was complete BS on the city's part to treat him like this. They went as far as going to the legislature with them. But even then, Betsy Lake wasn't the one that was writing it. And how do I know that? Because Dave was at the legislature getting the whole thing written with the other people and sending an email to Betsy saying, hey, look, I need you to look at this. I can't find you. There are 2 emails that are saying that. All right. So what the heck was going on where basically the A's were doing a lot of the city's work because the city hadn't properly staffed up. The city hadn't turned around and said, okay, exactly, here's what we need. And we need a public financing authority, and we need to staff that. They hadn't done that business plan work. They didn't treat it like a business. They treated it politically. They paid attention to hot button issues. The environment, okay, affordable housing, stuff that gets your attention, stuff that gets on the local news, but stuff that doesn't necessarily tell me that at the end of the day, I'm going to be able to build a ballpark. All right. That's the biggest problem. And so this is what I wrote and I'll read it to you. And I had a video version that's different. It says the news that the Oakland Athletics have placed an offer to purchase land in what Oakland A's president Dave Kaval called the quote Las Vegas Valley unquote is upon us. Speculation as to where that land will be has swirled. Here's why I assert the offer is for the Las Vegas Festival Grounds as opposed to the Mirage Hotel property. Now I'm going to I'll read this other paragraph and I'll skip over the rest. It says, first, while there's said to be 20 different site options identified for the A's. And think about how much time that takes. I've done site location work before, okay? And that's something that, look, just to locate and nail down 7 sites takes 2 weeks, all right? So you're looking at a month's work on that at least, all right? Month, okay? So, or 2. So anyway, it says that Brian Horwath of Las Vegas Sun, July 23rd, 21 Post. No, after Major League Baseball Commissioner Bob Manfred said, hey, you know what, we're going to look at Las Vegas, wrote, the Las Vegas Festival grounds stood out, and Kaval was quoted as saying, on the North Strip at the festival grounds, to have that view back down the entire strip, that would be pretty iconic, which is one of Dave's favorite words. So anyway, but let's go forward to find out why I made this statement when I made it, because it tells you, okay? And it was right here. Why are the A's doing this considering the work on Howard Terminal? And I wrote, the question here is, why are the A's going through all this with a Las Vegas ballpark effort when it looks like they're approaching the finish line with Howard Terminal Ballpark? And I said the simple answer to that question is because the city of Oakland wasted almost 2 years of time where there was no project manager and the only focus was on legislation and community engagement when SB 293 Skinner was signed. It was effectively left alone by Oakland. In other words, the law created by the city of Oakland and the Oakland A's and signed into law by California Governor Gavin Newsom on October 11th of 2021 was then left alone. It's actually 2019, not 2021. That's wrong. Was then left alone. Okay? Then left alone. Which should have been done, considering that it was to pave the way for the use of tax increment financing, was for the city of Oakland to start immediate meetings with the county of Alameda. Yeah, because instead, the city focused only on design and community engagement and environmental, and zero work to form a viable financing plan for Howard Terminal. For much of this time, the city of Oakland hid from public view the enormous revenue-generating potential of tax increment financing as part of Howard Terminal. On November 20th, 2019, city leaders asked me not to inform a group of 90 attendees for a Chinatown town hall about it, even though the estimate was $1.4 billion, assuming a $500 million ballpark, not $2 billion, a 45-year bond period, and a 4% rate of growth in assessed value. And the mayor of Oakland said in an interview with me that there were drafts, but she never, and still is not to this writing, presented the draft TIF revenue projections. In fact, she's never presented them, folks, ever. All right? Then, when the mayor did speak on the matter at the most recent Alameda County meeting, and I'm referring to July 20th of 2021, she said the city would seek to float a bond of just $150 million when it was clearly evident to anyone who knows tax increment financing that the bond issue potential was well into the $800 million area. My take is the mayor of Oakland was infected by the liberal conservative lens applied to sports stadiums by politicians, and which has nothing to do with the real math associated with stadium projects. Moreover, the math that came with SB 293 Skinner. In other words, in lay terms, folks, it's like this. The numbers are too big for her, all right? That's why you don't have your mayors leading projects, all right? Because they don't understand how to evaluate these things. And so, and they have to just simply appoint people and then trust that the people are going to lead them in the right direction. That's how it's done. You let your project managers do the project managing, okay? But I digress. And I wrote that if the city used SB 293 Skinner as the A's expected, and you heard Dave Kaval talk about this, and starting forming the infrastructure financing plan in late 2019, the matter of sources and uses of funds would have been a settled issue. Instead, Mayor Schaaf and her staff and consultants collectively did nothing until Major League Baseball expressed concern with the slow pace of the project in late March of 2021. In fact, I have a letter that was written by Betsy Lake. She was more concerned about a kind of a punch list of items she was supposed to get from the A's regarding the drawings, and that they hadn't gotten to her. And she wrote a letter that was really emotional about how they had spent a lot of staff time and hours and not getting a lot of sleep. They were horribly understaffed and horribly underfunded for what they needed to do, and should have used tax increment financing to close that gap, but didn't even think to do that. Okay. And that's like old hat with the way the city used to do things. And that is what I learned from the city when I was hired as an intern in 87. But I digress. Then it said the reason for this, in terms of how the mayor handled it, as the mayor said to me on 2 occasions, the city of Oakland had not done redevelopment and tax increment financing in some time and was still learning. The trouble is, she told that to a person, me, who served as an expert consultant in the cities of Oakland, San Francisco, and Emeryville, and private consultants on the matter of tax increment financing, and learned how to do it as an intern with the Oakland Redevelopment Agency in 87. From that, I created a complex spreadsheet for Oakland projects, and the city rehired me as a consultant in 88. On top of that, I wrote about TIF for years, and going back to my column in the Montclarian in Oakland between 1993 and 1996, okay? But with all that, Mayor Schaaf never turned to me for guidance and was bent on proving a staff that did not have the intellectual chops to do the work had it. To this day, why she did that is beyond me. Other people have some theories, but between Mayor Schaaf, who needed the right numbers, and the Oakland A's, who have the option of moving to another city, and ballpark opponents who wanted, nothing done in Oakland. Let's face it, they were out there, all right? And so did not care about having the right numbers at all. We have never gotten competent work on the matter of tax increment revenue at Howard Terminal outside the work I've done, and that's a fact. The mayor also did not turn to a task force of Oaklanders, okay? And neither did any Oakland City Council member. Think about this. Since most referred to Howard Terminal as, Libby's project, and that's what they would do. Say, oh, this is Libby's project. And I remember Larry Reed would say that. That's your god sister's project. That's your god sister's. Howard Terminal is your god sister's thing. It ain't mine. They collectively seem to want to keep their distance from it until it was clear that Major League Baseball had designs on leaving Oakland. For its part, the Oakland Athletics have maintained the parallel paths approach to be able to avoid being effectively sued for lack of good faith dealing. The A's have been very open. They've been screaming, you know what? We're doing this because we don't want to get sued. It's like their version of Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here, and that's basically, you can say in terms of Oakland, I'm just here so I don't get sued. I'm just here so I don't get sued. I mean, you can just play that on loop and just have Marshawn's face going again and again and again. I'm just here so I don't get sued, because that's what they were doing, folks. All right, and I'm not saying that what the A's were doing was not legitimate. No, just the opposite. All right, but they knew they had to see it through and literally dot every I and cross every T on their part. All right, because the city was screwing up again and again and again on its part, and yet would knowingly go right to the courts and hammer out a lawsuit against them. And the A's fully expected that if the city didn't deliver. So the best thing for the A's felt they needed to do was simply do the project right. Handle it as a business and work on parallel paths in order to achieve their objective in a timely fashion. That's what was going on, folks, okay? And so, all right. And so basically, I continued to write that the best way is to pick Howard Terminal. And this is what the A's should have done. All right. I wrote that the Athletics maintain the parallel paths. All right. But the image of me moving goalposts might land them in court anyway. And I didn't think it was a great way. I thought, look, if you're going to do this, just pick Howard Terminal and then make it work. All right. But see, here's the A's issue. And I understand it. And I understand what they were thinking. To do that means continuing to be associated with the city of Oakland that has the constant appearance of making up, like that they're just making up as they go along. That's how it looked, folks. All right? You should look at the conversations with the mayor and every other people. Look at the July 20th meeting with the city and the county. It was awful. Look at Ed Reskin's presentation regarding Howard Terminal. Oh, it was just, terrible. Looks like he was already, had his suit on and ready to get out of the escape hatch, right? Ed Reskin was the Oakland City Administrator. Now he's Vice Chancellor UC Santa Cruz. And so, at any rate, doing what I wrote was, that all that was happening at a time when the A's are revenue challenged. They need the money with respect because of the pandemic. And Oakland's turtle pace of movement, that's what I wrote, a turtle pace of movement was giving it and Major League Baseball little hope that a ballpark would come of all this. And then I wrote that the game will change when the Las Vegas ballpark drawings hit the internet. Of course, that eventually did happen, as we know. But what I'm saying is that, and then I said that, I wanted to work on this project. I made myself clear about that. Again, for anybody who thinks that's some reason to jam me or whatever, you don't understand what it means to believe in yourself and say that you're the best person in the world out there that can do anything. Okay. If you have that kind of attitude, you're not serving yourself well, let alone your family. All right. So just don't. So now I got that out of the way, and I will get back to your points and questions here. So where did I leave out? Oh, right here. Then Hilbert says, you don't have the fan base. We got that one. And I got this one. He says, and if the A's had a 162 record versus the opposite, then you have people who show up, otherwise they won't. And then he writes, the reverse boycott was to pressure Fisher to sell the team, which I disagree with, because look, John Fisher's doing this one way or the other. If the idea in Oakland was to build a ballpark to realize better run of revenues, better able to afford the modern players of the era and today's era, and have a greater franchise value, like I estimate $3 billion. That's what they're headed toward in Las Vegas. So if he's doing all this work to get there, why would he put the team up for sale all of a sudden just because the fans claim that they wanted to, when you have a good base of would-be fans moving from the Bay Area to Las Vegas for reasons associated with the pandemic as I speak? Many of them already there, right? So it says, it seems to me the A's are purposely trying to tank the deal by Howard Terminal by making it so no, that's not true. They weren't trying to tank the deal. And again, I'm going to say something, and forgive me for being stupid, okay? Saying something that's insulting, okay? But that's stupid. I mean, it is flat out ridiculous. Again, you've got prime real estate. The whole objective of any developer is to get control of your land for a moment, to negotiate on it so that you can eventually get a development agreement, all right, and start building on it to make the money that you project you're going to make. That's the idea. So when someone like the mayor of Oakland literally gives you the opportunity to have an exclusive negotiating agreement for Howard Terminal and the Coliseum, but then says pick one or the other, if you're smart, you do what John Fisher and company did. They picked both. They wanted to develop both. We handed a significant proportion of the Athletics, of the Oakland A's economy from a land use perspective to the A's. That's what Libby did. I thought it was ridiculous, but she did it. And so if you're the A's, you're not going to say, oh, gee, Miss Mayor, this is really nice, but you shouldn't do it like that. We don't want to be so greedy. Nah, you're going to take it. And that's what they did. They took the ENA and they started working on development on both areas. That's where Rooted in Oakland, the website, came from and all that stuff, okay? So no, you don't do that. That's brainless, okay? So, all right? There's no logic to what you're saying. It doesn't it doesn't pass the logic test, why would anyone want to tank their own deal and hurt themselves? It makes no sense whatsoever. All right. So he says, we will soon see if Fisher puts the money in Vegas to put out a competitive product. Here's why I don't understand why you guys don't get it. If you lived in, let me put it this way. If you lived in one particular box, all right, all your life, you become used to existing within this parameter, within this box. And people evaluate you because you're only in this box. But, so let's say what happens when you go from that box to this one, okay, with all this space in it and everything. This is pretty neat. All right. You have more possibilities. People don't quite. All right. You've got more room. This is the A's in Las Vegas. Okay. This is the A's in Oakland. Las Vegas. Okay. All right. Las Vegas, Oakland. That's the difference. Okay. So more money for players, more money for player development, more money to put a better product on the field. That's what they're going to get. Now, would they have gotten that at Howard Terminal? The answer is yes, 100%. But you would say, okay, why didn't they stick with it? Because the city was acting on Oakland time, okay? It wasn't acting on Major League Baseball time. And the city is great for doing that. It did it to me when I was trying to work on the Super Bowl. When the city of Oakland was trying to work on NFL time and I wouldn't let it. Excuse me. The city was trying to work on Oakland time and I wanted to work on NFL time. I just had just a couple of months. Yeah, people there running it who acted like I had the whole doggone year. That's Oakland's problem. And folks, I'm talking about as far back as 1999 when we were working on the Super Bowl. 1999. You can't do that. And now it's worse because you have strong mayors heavily politicized and there's no person there that's your chief administrative officer who knows they're going to be there beyond the next election. In the council manager form of government, we didn't have that problem because you needed 5 votes to get rid of the city manager. Now all you need this time is a pissed off mayor to get rid of the city administrator. That's a gigantic difference. That's built-in instability, folks, but that's what we've got today. And we've done nothing about it. And so the charter needs to be changed to get us out of the Measure X situation. We've lost 3 sports teams under it. We have had a gigantic homeless population because of it. And in total, the city has become more dangerous and less fun to live in, all because of the system of government. And all it's good for is getting someone's face on television because they happen to be the mayor of the council or whatever is left over from television, which doesn't exist like it used to. So the media cannot admit the government failed. It would destroy the mutual benefit society. So the fans just blame the evil billionaire mindlessly. That's true. Was it 55 acres all or nothing? Couldn't they have taken a smaller parcel? Why? Again, that goes back to what I was saying before. The only situation where a parcel, part of it would be smaller, was that, you do a deal with the maritime people and say, hey, we'll have you over here. Okay. But the Athletics didn't want that as much as I thought they should have taken it. That's another story entirely. You don't turn down prime land when someone gives it to you. That's prime land. Prime, huge. And so tank the team is about to occur. All the players that are free agent eligible about to be traded away. 2024 will be an all minimum wage player team. It says Oakland got the shaft from Libby. It says, how about the project being solely with the ballpark and do the real estate? No, again, no. The whole point is, this is what I'm getting at. The reason why I'm saying no is because the project was already that way. You had the ballpark first and everything else was phased. So it's not necessary to change anything. Could Oakland recover itself? Oakland needs to focus on an expansion team and forget about the Athletics. It was too late. All right. This road was created 4 years ago, way back in 2019, really early 2019. And now it's completed. And the A's are on their way to the next step of actually implementing the constructional ballpark. The Golden Knights, in fact, they're going to sign with the Stadium Authority once it's recast. And the next step will be a formality of signing the development agreement and the lease with the Stadium Authority, a restructured one. And that should happen, I would say, within the next 4 months, thereabouts. Says the Golden Knights were totally privately financed with an owner that was willing to go out and spend the money to put a championship team. Will Fisher spend the money for payroll in Vegas? Yes, yes. Do you really think the mayor could sell approximately $1 billion in bond financing? Well, mayors don't sell it. In fact, I want you to join me to later today at 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern. Guy Hobbs, the man who actually designed the bond issue, okay, for both the Raiders Allegiant Stadium and now the A's Stadium, will be on my show. You can ask him that question because that's not really how it works. I want this to be sort of a teaching of how bonds work, right? Right or wrong, the perception is that Fisher won't spend the money to put out a competitive product no matter what the revenue stream. We will find out in Vegas. I think that idea is ridiculous. I mean, it shows that people don't understand monetary flows through a stadium. If I say I own the stadium and I have Jamie Foxx, hopefully, and Taylor Swift and all these other events coming into my stadium and 80 baseball games, 81 baseball games and more if they go to the playoffs. And then the Athletics own the revenue from it. Not the stadium. The stadium is owned by the Stadium Authority, but they own the revenue stream. Why can't you understand that they're in a better position to make money and therefore would spend it and have more to spend on players than at the Coliseum? I mean, that's you got to be something's got to be wrong with you to not get that. Tower shaft. I mean, because my point is, even to those of you who are saying we're not going to use all of it, my point is the spigot is so much larger that what they use will be much larger than whatever they've enjoyed in their entire history in Oakland. Okay? So, hope it says Tower Shaft will run for governor in 2023. Huh? With a campaign slogan. This is 2023. I'll skip that over. You're not, oops, he says I meant 2028. Okay, with a campaign slogan, let me do for California what I did for Oakland, huh? Vlad says he tanked his own team. I wouldn't put it past him to tank a deal. It's not a matter of that at all. And it's a matter of putting a competitive team on the field because you want to win. Now, I'll say this. The situation for the Athletics in Las Vegas was so bad that in 2009, Major League Baseball actually considered contracting the A's. So we're talking about an envelope that doesn't produce a lot of revenue throw off. Period. Okay? Because actually I do get it. I know more than one business owner that would not spend the money to get a better outcome. It's called being cheap. But my point is, the A's will get more revenue such that from a standpoint of magnitude, they will automatically spend more. Period. End of story. Automatically. That's how big the difference will be. Okay? Automatically. automatically. Now, will they spin outlandishly? I certainly hope not. But the point is to be able to spin competitively. And right now, the A's have not been able to do that. Okay? So now I don't think you get it. Thomas says, whoever dreamt up the sell the team strategy was a moron. The strategy, this person writes, should have been, let's work together. We love the team. Yeah, we need the team. Sell the team, just move Fisher faster. I don't know to what degree it was a motivator. I think the motivator was just getting a deal done in Las Vegas because you had a number of people you've had, lobbyists you hired, staffers. There was a lot of work to be done in a small amount of time, but the journey, the end of the journey was the reward in this case, and they're getting that reward. I honestly don't think that they thought that at all, but it didn't help. Okay, it didn't help, and it was completely different from the Raiders fans, which said, "Hey, look, bring the team back, keep the team. We want the name and colors. We want you here." Mark and all. It wasn't like, hey, sell the team for everybody. Some people did have that idea, though. All right. Some did. So, but in either case, if you don't own a team, you don't have the right to ask for a lot of things by being insulting. And the behavior the A's fans have presented, for the most part, is, in my opinion, an outgrowth of internet behavior. People don't like that, and A's fans don't get it. And yeah, they're upset and they want to yell, but you can't yell and try with the idea of trying to convince somebody to do something when yelling is only going to chase them away. All right. So, and so Hopper says people don't always act rationally. Wrigley never spent the money back in the 80s, and the Cubs, with the fans leaving, only once a new owner and the Cubs' attendance revenue went up. But the whole point is, and what you're not getting, Hopris, is you're not thinking logically. You're trying to, and this is what kind of pisses me off. You're trying to win an argument rather than thinking about what you're saying. I go back to my example. I said that this is Las Vegas, all right? And this is Oakland. These are two different situations, okay? All right? Your example posits the same Wrigley Field. The same Wrigley Field. The same situation for the Cubs. In other words, you said it yourself. You said, look, really never spent the money back in the 80s on the Cubs with the fans leaving. Once a new owner, the Cubs' attendance and revenue went up. But what you didn't bother to consider is that they were in the same basic flow structure with respect to monies and where they went for events and how much money they could spend, whereas the A's are going from one situation to an entirely different one. So you're not thinking. Stop trying to win an argument. Start thinking about what it is you're saying. Says we will soon find out. If Fisher spends $250 million on payroll and $230, then you're right. If Fisher spends $60 million, then I'm right. $250 million is the average payroll for MLB. I have no worries about that. It's simple for me. If you put a superior product, then I won't buy. If you put a superior product, then I will. I won't make a big public protest. Okay, fine. The sell the team people, he writes, are hypocrites. They want the billionaire. They don't like to sell the team to another billionaire they like. Yeah, and so those are all the comments. All right. So for now. So my point is that, and I'm about to close out this one. But as you can see, that the Athletics were really paving the way to go out the door 4 years ago. And they did so because of the emergence of gambling in Sin City, the slowness of Oakland to really implement tax increment revenue and its legislation that both the city and the A's worked so hard to pass or get past. And the fact that Las Vegas has a different structure, which, sure, it some would say requires less environmental review, but that depends on where you choose to build it. If the A's had chosen to stay at the Coliseum, then the process would have been shorter on paper. But what the problem was the city itself didn't understand how to do, by admission of the mayor, redevelop it. And yet here we are, or were, with a redevelopment project in Oakland. She didn't have the proper staff, didn't want to bring in me to run Howard Terminal. And I guarantee you, if I were in charge, the A's would not have left. So, I mean, after all, I started the whole doggone thing by pointing Dave tax increment financing when he swore that public money wasn't used. And I said, hey, take a look at SB 628 Beal, which is the father of all enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation. By the way, I have an email in to Nancy Skinner's office, as I want to interview her regarding this. But candidly, Robert Gammon is her press secretary, and Robert has not been kind to me over the years. And I never thought I'd have to say this, okay? But I'm just saying it because it's disappointing. But I've twice tried to do this, and Robert has never responded. And he was the editor for the East Bay Express, and yet really routinely treated me in a way that was racist. I have to just get that on the table because I don't care where this goes. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. But I would have thought that as the press secretary for Senator Skinner, he would be professional enough to throw that aside. But yet again, hey, he's proven that's not the case. I would love to have Senator Skinner on. I would love to be wrong. So I'm putting out there to Robert, so if he sees this, he can prove me wrong, but bring her on. Because the effort to get SB 293 Skinner made should be a story. Because it's sitting out there still to be used, and yet the city hasn't used it. Okay? And so we have some more the Hopper says, if an A's fan is complaining considering bad conduct, then fair enough, but the fans aren't showing up because the team's performance is poor. Maximus Worldy says, when you lose 3 teams in 4 years, that means the city and government didn't do their part of it. Las Vegas did. Jay Belton says, hey, man, how you doing? How are you? Great to have you here. All right, folks, it's almost 2. Live long and prosper in your world. Remember, 2 o'clock today, Guy Hobbs. Join us, the architect of the bonds for both Allegiant Stadium and the Oakland A's Las Vegas ballpark at Tropicana to come. See you later. And please subscribe to Zenny62, bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com, and hey, invest in us. Please. Thank you. That is this broadcast. Thank you, everybody.